Jane couldn't shake off the thoughts that her husband might be cheating on her. She tried to ignore them, telling herself that she was just being paranoid. But her intuition could not be silenced. She needed to get to the bottom of things, and what better way to do that than to confront him on his business trip. She decided to accompany him on the trip, determined to get the truth out of him. As they boarded the plane, Jane couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. She was about to embark on a journey that could potentially destroy her marriage. But she had to know the truth even if it hurt. David, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to his wife's inner turmoil, too caught up in his own world of meetings and presentations. They arrived at their destination, a picturesque town by the coast, where they checked into a luxurious hotel. As Jane unpacked, she couldn't help but wonder if her suspicions were all in her head. Maybe she was overreacting and David was completely innocent. But she quickly pushed those thoughts away, knowing that she had to confront him and get some answers. Their first evening was spent attending a work dinner where Jane was introduced to David's colleague, Mark. He was charming and had a great sense of humor, and Jane found herself drawn to him. She couldn't help but compare him to David, who seemed distant and preoccupied. Mark, on the other hand, made her feel alive and appreciated. The following day, Jane decided to tag along with David to his meetings, using the opportunity to observe his behavior closely. But to her surprise, David seemed to be himself, professional and attentive. However, during a lunch break, Jane's suspicions were confirmed when she overheard David on the phone, his voice hushed and intimate. Her heart sank as she realized that he was having an affair. Feeling a mix of anger and hurt, Jane decided to confront David that evening. She waited until they were back in their hotel room and then asked him directly about the phone call. David tried to deny it at first, but Jane's silence and the evidence she had gathered made him confess. He admitted to having an affair with a colleague from his office, a woman he had been working with closely on a project. Jane was devastated. She couldn't believe that the man she had been married to for 5 years would betray her like this. She felt like her whole world had shattered. In that moment, her mind went blank, and without a word, she left the room and walked out of the hotel. The cool evening breeze helped clear her head as she wandered through the streets. She had no idea where she was going, but anywhere was better than being in the same room as her cheating husband. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't even realize where she had ended up until Mark's voice brought her back to reality. "Are you okay? You looked like you needed some fresh air," he said, concern evident in his voice. Jane couldn't hold back her tears any longer and broke down in front of Mark. She poured her heart out, telling him about her husband's affair and how she had come on this trip to confront him. To her surprise, Mark was understanding and empathetic. He shared his own experiences with infidelity and reassured her that she wasn't alone. As they continued talking, Jane found herself opening up to Mark in a way she never had before. He listened attentively and made her laugh, taking her mind off her troubles. Before she knew it, they had been walking for hours and Jane felt a weight lifted off her shoulders. For the first time in months, she found herself feeling happy and carefree. That evening, Mark and Jane had dinner at a cozy restaurant by the beach. They laughed and joked like old friends, and Jane couldn't help but be drawn to Mark. They talked about everything, and as the night went on, their conversations became more intimate. It was a strange feeling for Jane, who had been in a loveless marriage for so long. As the night came to an end, Mark walked Jane back to the hotel. They stood outside her room, and for a moment they just looked at each other, the air charged with tension. Without a word, Mark leaned in and kissed Jane. At first, she was taken aback, but she quickly melted into his embrace, feeling a sense of passion and connection that she had never felt with her own husband. Their affair continued for the rest of the business trip, with Jane sneaking off to see Mark whenever David was occupied with his work. She knew it was wrong, but being with Mark made her feel alive and desired in a way she hadn't felt with David in a long time. But as the trip came to an end, Jane knew that this affair couldn't continue once they returned home. As they made their way back, Jane couldn't help but dread facing David again. But to her surprise, it was David who initiated the conversation about their marriage. He was apologetic and begged for a second chance. Jane, on the other hand, couldn't bring herself to forgive him, not after what he had put her through. She decided to file for divorce and start a new life, free from the lies and betrayal. And as for Mark, Jane knew that their affair was a mistake, but one that she would always remember with a hint of bittersweet longing. Sometimes it takes being cheated on to find true happiness, and in Jane's case, that happiness came in the form of a passionate affair with a colleague she never thought she would fall for.